Fidelity high, the people you dig, the records they love.
Wayne Coyne is a musician, visual artist, and frontman of the legendary psychedelic rock band The Flaming Lips. Formed in 1983 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, their hit song Do You Realize was named the state's official rock song, and an alley has also been dedicated to the band by the Oklahoma City Council. In 2001, Wayne made his directorial debut with the science fiction film Christmas on Mars, and he is also the writer and illustrator of the comic book The Sun is Sick. The band have won multiple Grammy Awards and are also the subject of the 2005 documentary film The Fearless Freaks. Well known as a must-see live act, The Flaming Lips broke the Guinness World Record for the most live concerts performed in a 24-hour time span. Wayne is a frequent collaborator of Yoko Ono, Kesha, and Miley Cyrus, and alongside the other members of The Flaming Lips, released the 23-song album Miley Cyrus and Her Dead Pets in 2015. Wayne is also the creator of The King's Mouth, an enormous and immersive art installation piece that is synchronized to an exclusive soundscape by The Flaming Lips. The King's Mouth is a traveling installation that has been hosted at several museums. In 2017, The Flaming Lips released their 14th studio album, Oxy Melody, to critical acclaim. This year, the band have received a Tony Award nomination for their work on the original score of SpongeBob SquarePants the musical. They have also released Scratching the Door, the first recordings of The Flaming Lips, and are set to release the first volume of their greatest hits this year via Warner Brothers Records.
This is Wayne Coyne from The Flaming Lips, and my fidelity high is Donovan's Greatest Hits. You know, it was at a time when I was getting turned on to a lot of great punk rock records at the same time. And I remember there would be days where, you know, you'd put on the Husker Du record, you'd put on the Donovan record, and put on a Psychedelic Furs record. And in my world, in our life, in the way that we were perceiving music, that was the greatest thing ever. That it was just music that you loved, you know. You know, you can't deny music, especially when you're young. When music gets into you when you're young, that influence or that you know, that coloring it has over what, you know, the kind of music that you're, if you're lucky enough to make music, or the kind of music that you kind of have a, you know, this subconscious desire to be or whatever. And there is a sense of that Donovan type of songwriting in our thing. And I think it's mostly because some of his songs, not all of his songs, but some of his songs would be simple enough that I could have figured them out, you know, because it's like when music gets too complicated, even like a lot of Bob Dylan's music, I mean, for my abilities as a guitar player and being able to listen and figure out what people are playing, I could never really figure it out. But there would be a few of Donovan's songs that I would have been able to figure out. And then I could have said, oh, it's these, even if I was wrong, I could have said, oh, it's these chords, and I can hear this melody, and I can figure out these little connections. But yeah, so I think any of that, the simplicity of it definitely helped me figure out some things, yeah.
When Donovan was just 19 years old, he released his first single, Catch the Wind, on March 12, 1965. The single version of the song featured reverb on his voice, along with a string arrangement. Following its release, Donovan re-recorded the song, doing away with the reverb and strings and adding a harmonica solo for the version found on his debut album, What's Been Did and What's Been Hid, released just 2 months later. The song's melody was reminiscent of Dylan's Chimes of Freedom, prompting the media to name Donovan the British Bob Dylan. The tag may have been an unjust one, as the pair were both strongly influenced by the songs of Woody Guthrie before them. Just 10 days after the single release of Donovan's Catch the Wind, Dylan shocked audiences by going electric on side 2 of his album, Bringing It All Back Home, moving past the traditional folk the pair were both emulating. When Epic Records were compiling Donovan's greatest hits 3 years later, they were unable to secure the rights to the previous recordings of Catch the Wind. Donovan then re-recorded the song for a third time with his producer and collaborator Mickey Most. This new version was dramatically different than the original composition. It is expanded by nearly 2.5 minutes in length and features Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones on bass and keyboards.
Donovan is, he's a showbiz sort of guy, and what I mean is like when folk music, probably because of Bob Dylan, was taking over the world, he sounded probably more like Bob Dylan than Bob Dylan did. You mistake a lot of his music. Well, I mean, I don't mistake it, but I mean, it sounds very much like when Bob Dylan was being Woody Guthrie or something. It's in that vein. And then he has these songs that, and this is another great thing about him. I don't know if it's to his credit or to his detriment that he re-records them. And Catch the Wind, for me, I only knew the later version. So he has two versions of the same song. And the early version of Catch the Wind sounds very much like a Scottish guy doing a Bob Dylan interpretation. It's his own song, it's his own words or whatever, but it's very much in the vein of an early acoustic, Bob Dylan thing. And then he re-records it for whatever the legal reasons or whatever. There's always these great reasons why people have to do things. And I love that they couldn't use the original recording, so they re-record a version of it. I don't even know what year it is. This is 1968 or 69 or something. And this new version of the song that used to sound like a Bob Dylan song, to me, it sounds like a Beatles Hey Jude song. It starts off, it's very melodic and very, has whimsy, but it's got an emotional attachment to the melody, unlike the Bob Dylan version of it. And it's very sweet. It's very longing. It's got this, and I think works, for me, I think works a lot better than the Bob Dylan version, but that's just my subjective. I'm 8 years old when I hear it or something, And it has, I don't know if it was produced by, but I think it includes John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin. And later in the song, the drums come in and they sound slightly bombastic, as if it could be even John Bonham from Led Zeppelin playing. I think some people think it is, but I don't think it is. But it sounds great, and it's kind of ramshackle, and it kind of rocks, and it's kind of sloppy, and it kind of reminds you of, Hey Jude, or This is the Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. That's a song, by Fifth Dimension or something. So all these influences, again, of the time, Donovan just, he just takes them in and either is ripping them off or trying to sound like them, or just embraces the idea of I'm going to sound like whatever is happening, or whatever's happening is going to sound like me, or whatever it is that he's doing. And I think makes an absolutely great 5 minutes of music that I listen to all the time. And my copy of this Greatest Hits, I mean, that would be, I got the record at a used record store already. And then that particular song on the Greatest Hits would be so scratched up, that the scratches on my vinyl version of it from the late 70s would be part of the sound to me now. When I hear a pristine digital copy of it, I don't quite trust that it's really the song, because the song I'm used to hearing, Donovan he's struggling to get through the crackles and the distortion and all that haze of stuff that to me is just part of is why I like it. I mean, my mother had Tom Jones records when I was really, really young, and we, had the crappiest, record player that had the speakers inside the record player and all that you could buy at what was then the Walmart of the time, a TG&Y. I don't even know if people know what that is anymore. And we'd play these records 500 times a day with absolutely no regard for, throwing the needle on there as hard as we could and picking it up. And they were literally scratched to the point where you could hardly hear the song. But we had gotten so used to it after a while that, this haze of clutter and time and all that, it became part of the charm of those songs for me. So I think even in that, you see when the Flaming Lips go to do all this stuff, by the time we're really able to do recordings that are, somehow are mirroring my my subconscious desires, they have a lot of distortion on them. They sound like they could have been recorded in the late 50s or something. There's just something about this otherworldliness of this gentle, musical, quiet music having to fight its way through this haze of stuff. And I know that now. It's probably because I'm listening to those old Tom Jones records and Beatles records and all kinds of records, but especially this Donovan record, which was scratchy when I even first got it at the thrift store or whatever. But yeah, and I look at this thing that Donovan did where he re-records it. I applaud him, to not be caught in the idea of what you were. If you think about his career at the time, if his first version of Catch the Wind came out in, I don't even know when it would have been 1963 or 64. And here he is just 4 years later, which as an older person, 4 years, I'm like, that's just nothing anymore, Here he is 4 years later saying, yeah, I'm not that guy now, I'm this other guy. I'm like, go for it. I think that's the bravest, coolest thing you can do. And people say, well, is that authentic? I'm like, yes. Making a fool of yourself is the greatest proof of authenticity we have. It's like doing something that you're embarrassed about is nothing. Don't worry about that. The Flaming Lips career is that, it's the idea of that we get to express ourselves, and then now we changed our mind. Now we're saying something else, and that's what expression is. You can't know, and it would be boring to predict, the way you're going to be in the future. Who cares about that? The future, when it gets there, you're going to live in that moment, and that'll be what you want to do. To try to predict who you're going to be 1 or 2 years from now, it's like, that's just, it's boring.
In 1967, the filmmaker D.A. Pennebaker released his now legendary documentary, Don't Look Back. The film chronicles a confrontational Bob Dylan during his 1965 tour of England and features a young Donovan at the start of his career. Around the same time, Dylan would introduce Donovan to the members of the Beatles, and in just a few short years, Donovan and the Beatles would travel to India together to study transcendental meditation. While there, he wrote his 1968 hit Hurdy-Gurdy Man, as featured on Donovan's Greatest Hits. The tambura that he plays on the track was a gift from George Harrison, and the recording features John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page of a soon-to-be-formed Led Zeppelin. While still popular and active to this day, Donovan's career plateaued in the 70s. He told the UK-based newspaper The Telegraph in 2016, "I didn't want to be a pop star or a folk star. I was a poet, and I still am."
Back in the day, when you were able to watch the Pennebaker Don't Look Back, Dylan documentary at the time, we didn't really see it till it had been out for quite a while. These things only became available probably with the first reissue of things on VHS or something like that, And I have to say, I absolutely loved Donovan's hey man, I'm just cool with anything versus Bob Dylan's I hate everybody and I'm sick of all this stuff. It's like it was just the yin and yang of like they're both backstage. Donovan wants to be like Bob Dylan, but he has a kind of show busy, hey man, I'm just here because it's cool way about himself, which I think to me is a lot more likable. We all love and we all respect and we all admire, Bob Dylan's, he's just a ferocious ego or whatever. But I think as a guy to party with, he doesn't seem like he's that much fun. But Donovan goes on, and for whatever the reason, he gets connected to the Beatles, and he gets connected to guys who end up being the guys in Led Zeppelin, John Paul Jones, Jimmy Page, both playing on his Hurdy-Gurdy Man. I guess that's confirmed that he's playing on those. It's a great sounding record, and it's a weird record. Strange that it's a hit because it's a weird song. It's a weird song, to be a hit in America, and it's a popular enough song that a lot of people will know it. And I think because it has these references to, the guys who would end up being in Led Zeppelin, all that stuff keeps it kind of occasionally in people's minds. It's like, oh yeah, that's them as well. And it's cool. I mean, it's you do wonder why he kind of ran out of steam after the mid '70s. Donovan, not Led Zeppelin, but Donovan. Why he didn't? There's probably some recording of him out there trying to be new wave or something that never worked. but I would listen to it and see what he did.
Donovan's greatest hits features the song Mellow Yellow, which was released in 1966. The song reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in the US. It has been reported that Paul McCartney is one of the background voices featured on the song, and while uncredited, that he played bass on portions of the album of the same name. Donovan has stated that the song was about smoking dried banana leaves, and has also claimed that his usage of the term electrical banana was a reference to a vibrator at the time.
The way that Donovan makes a really ridiculously catchy song like Mellow Yellow, where you can sing about it, sing along with it and all that, and actually have no idea what he's talking about. And it can be, to you, whatever Mellow Yellow is, you can sing about it, and it can become whatever you think that is. But yeah, eventually you kind of go, no, really, what is it? And then because I'm old enough to know that people would try to smoke anything that was available to see if it got you high or got you off in some way, like smoking pot does or something. Yeah, there must have been some rumor or some idea that if you smoked, are we right by saying if you smoked dried banana peels, that you would get high on that? And I'm sure people probably did that. And there probably was a sense that if anytime you inhale a lot of smoke, you probably do get some sense of, I don't know if it's high, but you probably get some, head rush from it or whatever. But he probably didn't actually try it. Knowing him, he probably wanted to be the first one to write a song about it, because when everybody thought it was cool, he would have a song about smoking bananas. And then the idea that it was a vibrator, like a I guess it's like a banana-shaped yellow vibrator that must have come out in the early, I'm guessing this is late 60s or early 70s, which I don't believe is true. But if Donovan says it's true, that's good enough for me. And that he was singing about that as well. So this mellow yellow they call me mellow yellow. And whatever the words are that he says after that, is it French or whatever? It's a great evocative, cool vibe. And so the fact that it could be, about smoking bananas or about getting yourself off on this banana-shaped vibrator, it's like, hey man, those sound like great reasons to have a song. Mostly because it's a great song, and it's evocative, and this is where, for me, I feel like Donovan, because he's trying to be cool, or he's trying to be, he wants to be compared to other people or whatever, he does go into this area that I feel like is very original. It's sort of schmaltzy, it's kind of old-fashioned dance hall music, and it's very hippie, drug culture, American music at the same time. And, we get these great, great original moments. Now, I've never really listened to like a whole record of the record that, say, Mellow Yellow would have been on, the collection of songs that he would have put out, the 8 or 10 songs or whatever it would have been. And maybe a lot of those are cheaper or not as, as charming or whatever. But as a singular song with that title, Mellow Yellow, and I think it's just wonderful. And I think any songwriter and any artist trying to kind of have a meeting of their own tastes and their own life and their own trip, and yet have something to say that you feel like is of right now and all that. I think anybody would look at that and be pleased if they'd come up with that, and like, yeah. And it's another great example of, if this is put out in the late 60s or early 70s, 5 or 6 years after that, this song is going to be made fun of. It's going to be the song that you point at and say, yeah, this old-timey, stupid hippie music has nothing to do with what's going on now. And that's true of any music that you make. Any music that is relevant right now, in today's atmosphere, a month from now is not going to be relevant. And if you try to make music that is going to be forever relevant, it's not going to ever be relevant ever anyway, And this idea that, oh, he's not cool or whatever, it's like, no, that's what makes people cool, is they're either oblivious to the later arrows that will be slung at them because of their preciousness or whatever, or they're aware of it and they do it anyway, and we should all do that, say what you want right now. You can't predict what the meaning is going to turn into later, and I absolutely love that about him. And in time, I think that's why, his music is so, especially for musicians, there's an element of what he does that people you just really respect it, because it's unabashedly, he's going for it. And as the Flaming Lips, I mean, we have an enthusiasm for doing stuff that does put you into that category quite often. The things you said sometimes even before you can put your records out seem kind of stupid and irrelevant, even by the time you put them out. Oh, well, what do you do?
In addition to being an acclaimed songwriter, Donovan is also an incredibly talented guitarist. It is well documented that during his time spent in India with the Beatles, that he taught John Lennon and Paul McCartney a guitar picking style called the claw hammer. This technique heavily influenced the Beatles' 1968 eponymous double album, commonly referred to as the White Album. The technique can be heard in John Lennon's Dear Prudence and Julia, and Paul McCartney's Blackbird and Mother Nature's Son. It can also be heard on George Harrison's While My Guitar Gently Weeps.
He's a great singer, and like when we talk about the Beatles, we forget how insanely musical and talented they really are. I think it's the invisible part of it, because you get used to things just being so spectacular that you don't remember. Oh, it is spectacular, and I think there's a lot of those songs that Donovan would do. I'm not a very good musician even now. I got into music just out of sheer enthusiasm and loving to listen to it and, trying to do my own thing. But I can never figure out how he's doing stuff. And he's using capos and he's using weird tunings. The same like with, obviously with some Beatles stuff, or even like Simon and Garfunkel. It's just, they're great simple songs, but they're done by these guys, and people don't talk about this aspect of it, but that they're really great guitar players, and not just great at hitting notes, but stylistically and having evocative moods come out of this sort of clunky instrument. And Donovan is, he's just seamless like that. Of course, he's playing this insane great guitar and then some other weird tuning, and it just sounds so perfect and simple. But it's not effortless. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of talent made with work, and going over and over and over and making it work, making it simple, making it a song, making it evocative and all that. It's just not apparent. And I think when people are really, really great at what they're doing, that's the greatest compliment they can have. It's like, oh, how great. It's like watching someone, run a marathon. I could do that if I wanted to, but I don't really want to, but I could if I wanted to, because anybody can do it, right? That, it's like, no, it's not like that. But it's wonderful that it appears that way. I think that's part of the great mastery of the art, is that, of course you like this, because, if you sat down to sing and play guitar, you might sound like this too. It's not true, but I mean, that's part of the joy of it, is that this is part of all of us, and and anytime, there's always this silly thing where people who aren't musicians or whatever like talking about Ringo Starr of the Beatles, and it's like, oh, poor Ringo, he wasn't very good. I'm like, what are you talking about? You have no idea what you're talking about, but you're not gonna convince them. This is just this concocted, stupid thing that everybody refers to, like, well, of course, John Lennon is talented and Ringo's just kind of lucky to be along. It's like, no, they're all insanely great at what they're doing. And the fact that you don't just like one of their songs, that with the Beatles and like a lot of artists, you like almost every song that they do, that's everybody being insanely great at what they're doing. And you can go listen to a lot of bands who aren't that good and you won't like them as much because all those things come together, and it makes it seem that it's simple and that anybody could do it, and it can make people have these dismissive qualities, like, oh, he's not that good. And it's like, no, I mean, Donovan, you think about him whatever way you want, but he's amazing. He's an amazing singer, he's an amazing songwriter, he's an amazing lyricist, amazing, musician. Yeah, that's why those records were put out to begin with, let alone that they, there's some of them are still going to work today. They'll probably work forever, and yeah, they're cool. I mean, and I think all that is good news. It's good news to think that it's because they work hard, It's good news because they're trying. It's good news because they're trying and failing. It doesn't all work, but some of it really works. I think all that's good news. I think the worst thing in the world for people to hear is like, oh, it's just easy. No, I just wake up and do it, It's like, no. I mean, what I like about artists, the more I know about them, is, yeah, they would try over and over. And they'd fail, they'd try again, they'd keep working at it, and then they'd have a breakthrough and they would get lucky. Yeah.
Thank you to Wayne Coyne of the Flaming Lips, and thanks for listening to this episode of Fidelity High. All episodes of Fidelity High are available for download on iTunes and fidelityhigh.com.